Mr. God, this is Anna. Chapter 1. The difference from a person and an angel is easy. Most of an angel is in the inside, and most of a person is on the outside. These are the words of 6-year-old Anna, sometimes called Mouse, Hum, or Joy. At 5 years, Anna knew absolutely the purpose of being, knew the meaning of love, and was a personal friend and helper of Mr. God. At 6, Anna was a theologian, mathematician, philosopher, poet, and gardener. If you asked her a question, you would always get an answer, in due course. On some occasions, the answer would be delayed for weeks or months, but eventually, in her own good time, the answer would come, direct, simple, and much to the point. She never made 8 years. She died by an accident. She died with a grin on her beautiful face. She died saying, "I bet Mr. God lets me get into heaven for this." And I bet he did too. I knew Anna for just about 3.5 years. Some people lay claim to fame by being the first person to sail around the world alone, or to stand on the moon, or by some other act of bravery. All the world has heard of such people. Not many people have heard of me, but I too have a claim to fame, for I knew Anna. To me, this was the high peak of adventure. This was no casual knowing, it required total application. For I knew her on her own terms, the way she demanded to be known, from the inside first. Most of an angel is in the inside, and this is the way I learned to know her, my first angel. Since then, I have learnt to know 2 other angels, but that's another story. My name is Finn. Well, that's not quite true. My real name doesn't matter all that much, since my friends all call me Finn, and it's stuck. If you know your Irish mythology, you will know that Finn was pretty big. Me too. Standing at about 6'2", weighing some 16 and odd stone. Close to being a fanatic on physical culture, the son of an Irish mother and a Welsh father, with a passion for hot saveloys and chocolate raisins, but not together, may I add. My great delight was to roam about Docklands in the early night time, particularly when it was foggy. My life with Anna began on such a night. I was 16 at the time, prowling the streets and the alleys with my usual supply of hot dogs, and the street lamps with their foggy halos showing dark, formless shapes moving about from the darkness of the fog and then disappearing again. Down the street, a little way, a baker's shop window softened and warmed the raw night with its gas lamps. Sitting on the grate underneath the window was a little girl. In those days, children wandering the streets at night were no uncommon sight. I had seen such things before, but on this occasion it was different. How or why it was different has long since been forgotten, except that I'm sure that it was different. I sat down beside her on the grating, my back against the shop front. We stayed there for about 3 hours. Looking back over 30 years, I can now cope with those 3 hours, but at the time I was on the verge of being destroyed. That November night was pure hell. My guts tied themselves into all manner of complicated knots. Perhaps even then something of her angelic nature caught hold of me. I'm quite prepared to believe that I had been bewitched from the beginning. I sat down with "Shove up a bit, Titch," She shoved up a bit, but made no comment. "Have a hot dog," I said. She shook her head and answered, "It's yours." "I got plenty. Besides, I'm full up," I said. She made no sign, so I put the bag on the grate between us. The light from the shop window wasn't very strong, and the kid was sitting in the shadows, so I couldn't see what she looked like, except that she was very dirty. I could see that she clutched under one arm a rag doll, and on her lap a battered old paint box. We sat there for 30 minutes or so in complete silence. During that time, I thought there had been a movement of her hands towards the hot dog bag, but I didn't want to look or comment in case I put her off. Even now, I can feel the immense pleasure I had when I heard the sound of that hot dog skin popping under the bite of her teeth. A minute or two later, she took a second and then a third. I reached into my pocket and brought out a packet of Woodbines. "Do you mind if I smoke while you're eating, Titch?" I asked. "What?" She sounded a little alarmed. "Can I have a fag while you're eating?" She rolled over and got to her knees and looked me in the face. "Why?" she said. "My mum's a stickler for politeness. Besides, you don't blow smoke in a lady's face when she's eating," I said. She stared at half a sausage for a moment or two, and looking at me fully, she said, "Why? Do you like me?" I nodded. "You have a fag then." And she smiled at me and popped the rest of the sausage into her mouth. I took out a Woodbine and lit it up, and offered her the match to blow out. She blew, and I was sprayed with bits of sausage. This little accident produced such a reaction in her that I felt that I had been stabbed in the guts. I had seen a dog cringe before, but never a child. The look she gave me filled me with horror. She expected a thrashing. She clenched her teeth as she waited for me to strike her. What my face registered, I don't know. Perhaps anger and violence, or shock and confusion. Whatever it was, it produced from her the most piteous whimper. I can't describe this sound after all these years. No words are fitting. The feeling I can still taste, can still experience. My heart faltered at the sound, and something came undone inside me. My clenched fist hit the pavement beside me, a useless gesture in response to Anna's fears. Did I think of that image then? The image that I now think of, the only one that fits the occasion. That perfection of violence, that ultimate horror and bewilderment of Christ crucified. That terrible sound that the child made was a sound that I never wish to hear again. It attacked my emotional being and blew a fuse. After a moment or two, I laughed. I suppose that the human mind can only stand so much grief and anguish after it blows the fuse, which it did with me. My fuse blew in a big way. The next few minutes I know very little about, except that I laughed and laughed, and I realised that the kid was laughing too. No shrunken bundle of fear. She was laughing, kneeling on the pavement and leaning forward with her face close to mine, and laughing and laughing. So very many times in the next 3 years I heard her laughter. No silver bells or sweet rippling sounds was her laughter, but like a 5-year-old bellows of delight, a cross between a puppy's yelp and a motorbike and a bicycle pump. I had my hands on her shoulders and held her off at arm's length. And then came that look which is entirely Anna's. Mouth wide open, eyes popping out of her head, like a whippet straining at the leash. Every fibre of that little body was vibrating and making a delicious sound. Legs and arms, toes and fingers, the whole of that little body shook and trembled like Mother Earth giving birth to a volcano. And what a volcano was released in that child. Outside the baker's shop in Dockland on a foggy November night, I had the unusual experience of seeing a child born. After the laughter had quietened off a bit, but while her little body was still trembling like a violin string, she tried to say something, but it wouldn't come out properly. She managed a, you. After some little time and a great deal of effort, she managed, "You love me, don't you?" Even if it had not been true, I could not have said no to save my life. True or false, right or wrong, there was only one answer. I said yes. She gave a little giggle and pointed a finger at me. "You love me," and then broke into some primitive gyration around the lamppost chanting, "You love me, you love me, you love me." 5 minutes of this, and she came back and sat down in the grating. "It's nice and warm for your bum, ain't it?" she said. I agreed. It was nice for your bum. A moment later, "I aren't half thirsty." So we upped and went along to the pub just down the road. I bought a large bottle of Guinness. She wanted one of them ginger pops with the marble in the neck. So she had 2 ginger pops and some more Savoys from the all-night coffee stall. "Let's go back and get our bums warm again," she grinned at me. Back we went and sat once again on the grating, a big 'un and a little 'un. I don't suppose that we drank more than half of the drinks, for it seemed that the idea of a fizzy drink was to shake it vigorously and to let it shoot up into the air. After a few showers of ginger pop and a determined effort to do the nose trick, she said, "Now do it yourn." I'm sure even then that this was not a request, but an order. I shook hard and long, and that let fly with the stopper, and we both were covered with frothy Guinness. The next hour was filled with giggles and hot dogs, ginger pop and chocolate raisins. The occasional passer-by yelled out, "Oi, mister!" "He loves me too, he do." Running up the steps of a nearby building, she shouted, "Look at me, I'm bigger than you." About 10:30 that evening, while she was sitting between my knees, having an earnest conversation with Maggie, her rag doll, I said, "Come on, Titch, it's about time you were in bed. Where do you live?" In a flat, matter-of-fact voice, she exclaimed, "I don't live nowhere. I have runned away." "What about your mum and dad?" I asked. She might have said the grass is green or the sky is blue. What she did say was just as factual and effortless. "Oh, she's a cow and he's a sod, and I ain't going to no bleeding cop shop. I'm going to live with you." This was no request, but an order. What could you do? I merely accepted the fact. "Right," I agreed. "You can come home with me, and then we'll have to see." At that point, my education began in earnest. I got myself a large doll, but not an imitation doll, a real live one, and for I could make out, a bomb with legs on it. Going home that night was like coming home from Hampstead Heath, slightly tiddled, a little dizzy from the merry-go-round I'd been on, and not a little bewildered that the beautiful doll I'd won on the shooting range had come to life and was now walking beside me. "What's your name, Titch?" I asked her. "Anna. What's yours?" "Finn," I said. "Where do you come from?" I didn't get an answer to this question, and that was the first and last time she didn't answer a question. I gathered later the reason for this. It was because she was afraid that I might have taken her back. When did you run away? Oh, 3 days ago, I think. We took the short way home by climbing over the cut bridge and crossing over the railway yards. This was always my way in, because we lived next to the railway and it was convenient, to say nothing of the fact that it meant I didn't have to get Mum out of bed and open the front door. We got into the scullery by the back door and then into the kitchen. I lit the gas. For the very first time, I saw Anna. God only knows what I expected to see. Certainly not what I did see. It wasn't that she was dirty or that her frock was about 10 sizes too big. It was the mixture of ginger pop, Guinness, and her paint tin. She looked like a little savage. Smears of various coloured paints all over her face and arms. The front of her frock a complete riot of colours. She looked so funny and so tiny, and her response to my bellow of laughter so reduced her to that cowering self again, that I hurriedly picked her up to the level of the mirror over the mantelpiece and made her look. Her delicious little giggle was like closing the door on November and stepping out into June. I can't say that I looked much different that night. I was too covered in paint. A right pair, as my mum said later. In the middle of all the giggles, there was a thump, thump, thump on the wall. That was Mum's signal. That you? Your supper's in the oven, and don't forget to turn the gas off. Instead of the usual, OK, Mum, won't be long. This night, I opened the door and yelled down the passage, Mum, come and see what I've got. One thing about Mum, she was never fussed about anything. She took everything in her stride. Bossy, the cat that I brought home one night, and Patch, the dog, the 18-year-old Carol, who stayed with us for 2 years, and, of course, Danny from Canada, who stayed about 3 years. Some people collect stamps or beer mats. Mum collected waifs and strays, cats, dogs, frogs, people, and she believed a whole host of little people. Had she been confronted that night with a lion, she'd have made the same comment. The poor thing. One look when she came through the doors was enough. Oh, the poor thing, she cried. What have they done to you? And then, as an afterthought to me, you look a right mess. Wash your face. And with that, Mum flopped onto her knees and put her arms around Anna. Being embraced by Mum was like tangling with a gorilla. Mum had arms like other people have legs. Mum had a unique anatomical structure which still puzzles me, for she had a 14-stone heart in a 12-stone body. Mum was a real lady, and whatever she may be now, she still is a lady. A few minutes of oohs and ahs, then things began to get organised. Mum heaved herself upright, and with the passing shot to me, to get those wet clothes off that child, flung open the kitchen door, yelling, Stan, Carol, come here, quick. Stan's my younger brother by 2 years. Carol was one of the waifs and strays that came and went. The kitchen and the scullery suddenly erupted. A bath appeared. Kettles of water on the gas rings, towels, soap. The kitchen range was filled with coal, and there was me trying to undo sundry hooks and eyes on Anna's clothing. And suddenly there she was, sitting cross-legged on the table, as raw as the day she was born. Stan said, Bastard. Carol said, Oh, Lord. And Mum, well, she looked a bit grim. For a moment, that little kitchen blazed with the hatred of someone. That poor body was bruised and sore. The 4 older people in the kitchen were ready to bash someone, and for a time we were lost in our own anger. But Anna sat and grinned, A huge, face-splitting grin. Like some beautiful sprite, she sat there, and I believed for the very first time in her life she was entirely and completely happy. The bath completed, the soup downed, and Anna resplendent in Stan's old shirt, we all sat around the kitchen table and took stock of the situation. Questions were asked, but no answers were forthcoming. We eventually decided that the day had been filled with enough questions. The answers could wait until tomorrow. While Mum went to work getting Anna's clothes clean again, Stan and I made up the bed on the old black leather sofa next door to me. I slept in the front room, a room stuffed full of aspidistras, a tall boy with the precious pieces of cut glass displayed on top, one bed, and sundry bits and pieces scattered around. My room was separated off from the next room by a large baize curtain hung on big wooden rings that slid back and forth with their clack, clack, clack. Behind the curtain was Anna's sofa bed. Outside my bedroom window was a street lamp, and as the windows were only covered with lace curtains, the bedrooms were always well lit. As I said, our house was right next to the railway, with trains passing all day and all night. But you get used to that. In fact, after 19 years, the rumbling and the rush of passing trains was more of a lullaby than a noise. When the bed had been made and all the night preparations had been attended to, I went back into the kitchen again. There was the little imp enthroned in the cane chair, swaddled in blankets, drinking a cup of hot cocoa. Bossy was sitting on her lap, giving a fair imitation of Houdini trying to wriggle out of a straitjacket, and Patch at her feet, beating time with his tail on the floor. The hiss of the gas lamp, the bright firelight, the little pools of water on the floor, all turned that little kitchen into a Christmas scene. The Welsh dresser, the shining pots, and the black-leaded kitchen range with its brass fire irons and guard seemed to sparkle. In the midst of it all sat the little princess, clean and shining. This little thing had the most splendid, most beautiful copper-coloured hair imaginable, and a face to match. No painted cherub on some church ceiling was this child, but a smiling, giggling, squirming, real little child, her face alight with some inner radiance, her eyes like two blue searchlights. Earlier in the evening I had said yes to her question, "You love me, don't you?" because I was unable to say no. Now I was glad out that I'd been unable to say no, for the answer was yes, yes, yes. How could anyone fail to love this little thing? Mum gave a bit of a grunt, as her usual. "Well, we had better get to bed, or we won't be worth anything tomorrow." And so I picked up Anna and took her along to her bed. The bedclothes were already pulled back, and I put her down and made as if to tuck her in. But this was all wrong. "Ain't you going to say your prayers?" she asked. Well, yes," I replied, "when I get to bed." "I want to say mine now with you," she said. So we both got down on our knees, and she talked while I listened. I've been to church many times and heard many prayers, but none like this. I can't remember much about her prayer, except that it started off with, "Dear Mr. God, this is Anna talking." And she went on in such a familiar way of talking to Mr. God that I had the creepy feeling that if I dared look behind me, he would be standing there. I remember her saying, Thank you for letting Finn love me. And I remember being kissed good night, but how I got to bed I don't know. I lay in bed in some confusion, wondering what had hit me. The trains rattled on their way. The fog swirled around the street lamp. It may have been that I'd laid there for an hour, possibly two, when I heard the clack of the curtain rings, and there she was, standing at the end of my bed, quite visible in the lamplight. For a minute or two, I lay there thinking that she just wanted to reassure herself, when she moved around the head of my bed. I said, "Hiya, Titch." "Can I get in?" she whispered. She didn't wait for my "if you want to," but slid in beside me and buried her head in my neck and cried silently. Her tears warm and wet on my chest. There was nothing to say, nothing to do but put my arm around her. I didn't think I would sleep, but I did. I woke to the sound of stifled giggles, Anna still beside me, giggling like a fiend, and Carol, already dressed, standing there giggling, with a morning cup of tea in her hand. And all this in less than 12 hours.